Today we're going to step through a quick tutorial on setting up a new file within VCarve Pro 12, and specifically VCarve 12.5. So as we look at the various options here on the left side, you can always come up here to File and do New. I always use the Quick Start, and so we effectively choose Create a New File. And in this case, it's already defaulted to basically the entire width and height of my CNC, but that's not what we're going to carve today. So let's go ahead and adjust this down. It's a single-sided job. We're just going to record on one side or carve on one side, and we're just going to do a quick 12 by 12 job size. The thickness, we'll adjust that down. Say we're going to do a test carve on a piece of plywood. We're going to key off of the material surface. So this would be the top of the piece of wood that we're putting onto the CNC. Not necessarily off the machine bed. Some people go off the machine bed, which if you know the exact thickness of every material you're going to use, that works great. In this case, we're going to key off the top because we're just going to do a simple V-carve into the top of the piece of wood. And we don't need to worry about offset or some of these other settings. We can adjust this depending on your computer. You may use a faster or a slower modeling. That's just how it looks on the computer screen. It's not, doesn't adjust how fast it's going to carve or anything like that. And you can adjust material settings if you want. Most of the time this is simply the color that it will show up here within Vectric. And so normally I just choose pine, just so it's a nice wood-like color. And then we'll go ahead and generate the job settings right there, and there it goes. And then to start putting in your vectors, we can add text. So in this case, we're just going to do a hello world carving, and we're just going to keep it with the true type. I tend to prefer this font. There's lots of fonts you can choose from, various different capabilities depending on how deep you're carving. You may want to choose certain font types. You may also want to try the single line, because those single lines will allow you to kind of do a toolpath carving into it. But this gives us a nice deep looking V-carve, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And we're just going to leave it at the standard settings. We are going to adjust the height. Since we're doing a 12 by 12 inch job settings, we will effectively, let's just go with we'll just do maybe a 2-inch text height, and then just retype this text. You can see that font actually is bigger than I had planned it to be. So let's go ahead and adjust that back down to 1 inch, and then we can close that, and effectively we have our first vector here to be carved. And I'm going to put a slight curve on it, but first I want to make sure it's centered. So we'll come down here to the center, transform the object, and we can put it directly in the align of the material. We can align it multiple items together. Since we only have one item, we'll just align it here, and I don't really want it in the exact center, like if I want to add anything else in the middle, but I can move it up here. I'm just going to say, I kind of like that position right there, and then we can just align it to the left, right, and then I'll put it right in the center. And then we've got some text that can be carved. I'm going to put a slight curve on it, so I'm going to arc it, but first I got to draw the curve or the arc that I'm going to curve it to. And so we can basically come in and choose this straight line, roughly the same height, roughly the same length as the text we're going to use, and we'll do a slight curve on it like so, and then we can come back out and we can select our multi-tool selection. We'll pick both of the items we want to do, the curve as well as the text, and then we'll curve it along the text. We can scale it to fit the curve. We can maintain the current text size and see how it slightly adjusts the text size font there. And we effectively can adjust the spacing as well as other parts and pieces here. I'm just going to kind of keep it roughly the same. maintain the text size, and then I want it to be above the curve. You can also do on the curve or below the curve depending on which job you're trying to do. But we'll do this one above the curve, and then I want it in the middle, and so effectively want it in the middle of that line. Since we did that, we've got this effectively here. We want to make sure that that's still center, and so we'll come in and we'll just recheck. You see it was slightly off right there, and so we've got a line left right. It's right in the middle of our carve. We'll go ahead and close that. And then let's go ahead and add a toolpath here. So there's lots to choose from. And the toolpath, I'm going to pin this just simply so that, oh, there's that first text that we had created. Let me go ahead and delete that. Pin the toolpath there just so it doesn't keep popping in and out. And there's lots of options here. There's the profile toolpath, the pocket toolpath, as well as drilling, threading. I don't really use the threading one. Quick engraving toolpaths, and then inlays. The one we're going to do for today, though, is the VCarve. So we've got a VCarve engraving toolpath here. And so we'll select the toolpath we want to carve. We don't really need to worry about that arc. That was more just for us to draw the line. We'll go ahead and pick the VCarve, and we're going to start it at 0. We're going to set a flat depth in this case because we don't want it to, dive super deep into the wood. So we're going to set this at kind of 0.2 inches, or about 1/5 of an inch for those that prefer fractions. And we're going to select this. We have a 60-degree V-bit that is effectively, I do most of my carves with a 60-degree or sometimes a 45-degree. And I've preloaded in a bunch of V-groove bits. I use white side as well as bits and bits and speed tool. I've got a selection of different types. Just depends on what I'm trying to accomplish with the various bits that are available, as well as price point. If it's a final carve, I tend to use my nicer bits, and I buy some cheaper bits to use for the test runs. And so if the bit breaks, and it's not that expensive, and then I can tune in the settings and then move forward with the nicer bit that will do a little bit crisper, cleaner carve. And so for this one, we'll use the 60-degree V-bit, and we'll set it, pretty much the toolpaths are set. Sometimes I'll slow it down depending on the material. If this is carving into a pine or a piece of plywood, 100 inches per minute is fine. If you're going into like a white oak or a hickory or walnut, something that's a little bit harder, then you'll want to slow this down for two reasons. One is burn. Like if it's moving too fast, it'll actually burn the wood, and it's hard to sand that out. As well as if you're moving too fast, it can leave. It basically looks like it's unfinished. It looks like it's a rougher pass. And sometimes I'll run a second pass just to make sure that anything is smoothed out. So we effectively have our settings here. Go ahead and just apply, and then we'll select that bit. And now it's going to automatically set all of our toolpaths to match the settings for this. And we're not going to use a clearance tool. That would be like if I needed to carve out like a deeper pocket or something that's, the V-bit would take a really long time to carve out. We can use a roughing bit, but we're not going to use a clearance tools on this one. We're just going to carve the V-bit. And, we don't need to set any, ramp or plunge moves or some of those other features that you might do on a more complex carve. And we are going to leave these all unchecked, and we'll just leave the standard name. Sometimes, actually, what I will do is I'll actually take the name of the bit. So this is the 1560. And then this is cut 1. If you're doing multiple cuts, once you load this into the CNC machine, having them listed out as kind of cut 1, 2, 3, just so you can sequentially go through it. It also puts it in order on the screen. Then we'll add some information about the carve itself. And so that effectively tells us this is cut 1, and there's no future cuts, but this is cut 1, and this is what is going to carve, and the bit that we need to use for it. And so when we run that calculate, you'll see it has kind of drawn in the toolpath movements. The red is the movement there. This hello world gets carved out, and that's effectively, now that toolpath is ready to be saved and processed. But let's go ahead and just make sure that it looks good. So we'll reset the preview, and we'll just run the preview selected path. Let's make sure, and let's watch the animation here. So preview selected path. It goes really, really fast because it's not that complicated of a carve. And because we're in the 3D view, we effectively can rotate this to see the depth coming through. We can see that that carve was pretty clean. And then we can go ahead and export that cut. So kind of coming back here to the toolpath selections, there's a few options here, such as recalculate. So you made a bunch of changes, but you didn't review or save all of them. You can effectively recalculate. That'll run all the toolpaths in this list. We've only got one here, but if we had 10, it would automatically recalculate all of them. So we made some adjustments to, if we move the hello world down a little bit, we could recalculate at the new location based on where the vectors are. So we went through kind of the preview of the toolpath, and then this is something else we can look at, is how long will this take? Which for this simple of a cut, not that long. It's a 4-minute carve, and that's effectively based on the inches per minute that you set. And I think we actually put this at 100, so it would actually be faster. There are some up and down movements for the z-axis that it won't quite calculate the same way. So you can kind of estimate, this isn't the exact time, but you can take this number and use it as an estimate. And so the last step then is to save that toolpath. We group where possible if it's multiple, but in this case we're just going to do one. It's the selected toolpath. We're going to set it up for the processor that I use. So my CNC is a Onefinity, and so there's a Masso processor that effectively does all the calculations, and that's what I'll use to start the carve and maintain, monitor the settings, all the things you do around the actual carving. And so when you save this toolpath, it sets it for that. And so go and put it in a new folder for Hello World. And then we can cut that. Then we can hop over and see some of the CNC work here. So let's see, where's Hello World? Hello World right there. And so that effectively would give you your G code that you can send over. Just kind of looking at it to see, eyeballing it, does that look relatively right? And then it's got all those calculations for sending the bit around, making the carve. So going back to VCarve here, that's effectively a tutorial on setting up your first job, going through the details of creating a carve, creating vectors, saving it, exporting it, getting it ready to go.